Hello and welcome to our Defence Monthly programme, where I'm joined in the studio by our Defence editor, John Lake, and from New Delhi by Defence correspondent Jay Menon. Jay, hi. Well, I tell you what, there's been quite a lot happening in this past month, and today we're going to be talking about new attack helicopters and orders, and we're talking about military MRO. We're going to be covering the allegations of corruption in equipment deals, and we're going to be talking about a new training partnership for Qatari pilots and the RAF. So join us after this short break. Welcome back. Well, April seems to have been pretty busy with various training exercises. And just to prove we weren't reading too much into our last show about Saudi Arabia teaming with India being a change in geopolitical scene for India and our neighbours, the Saudis showed they were still chummy with their old training pals Pakistan, joining them at the Musharraf Air Base for the joint 2021 Air Excellence Centre exercise, along with USA Special Forces. Now, the event was also witnessed as participants there, as observers, by I think Bahrain, by Egypt and Jordan. So it was quite an event. The Tornadoes were there working with the F-16s and the JF-17 just to demonstrate interoperability. So Jay, how is this seen in India?
Yeah, Alan, sometimes media reports can be a barometer to gauge the importance a country gives to a particular event or an incident. So this Pakistan's ACE meet had a wide coverage in the Indian media, and that too mainly because the exercise was held weeks after India's participation in the desert flag exercises in the UAE with Saudi Arabia and the US. So Pakistan was quick enough to respond soon after the exercise that, the exercise helped strengthen the bonds of cooperation between the Royal Saudi Air Force and the Pakistani Air Force. Because, when India conducted that exercise with the UAE and Saudi Arabia, there were a lot of eyebrows which were raised in Pakistan, because both the countries were close ally of Pakistan. So, but in India, India understands that despite the improving trajectory that Saudi-Pakistan relation, the bilateral meet will be limited to a modest economic and military cooperation. Because the strategic drift between Islamabad and the two GCC heavyweights like Abu Dhabi and Riyadh will continue as Pakistan-Turkey partnership grows.
Thanks very much, Jay. Of course, we have to remember that Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have been allies since the foundation of Pakistan. And, they've had training agreements in place since the birth of the Saudi Air Force and since the birth of the Pakistani Air Force. And they've been very close allies right from the word go, and particularly since 1967 with everything that happened then. We had the news this month, of course, that a delegation from Bahrain has travelled to Bell, to their plant at Amarillo in Texas, to mark the start of production of the first of the fleet of a dozen AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters for the Royal Bahrain Air Force. The original order was made public back in 2018. It's a foreign military sales order, but it's only recently had the formal OK from the US Senate, and the delegation, mostly from Bahrain's US Embassy, were there to see it begin its way along the production line, this first aircraft. Of course, the Royal Bahrain Air Force has already successfully operated the original single-engined AH-1F, the Foxtrot Cobra, for many years, and those aircraft are now getting quite tired.
Well, John, we can now hear, I hope, if technology is working properly, we should have Joel Best joining us on the programme from Fort Worth, Texas. Joel is the Director of Global Military Sales and Strategy for Bell, and was, of course, actually based in the region for quite some time, I think. Now, Joe, this order for the 12 aircraft is the first Viper export sale, and certainly in the region, eh?
Yeah, so there's actually been a previous FMF case that was done, but for the FMS side of our business, Bahrain is our first customer. We're thrilled. We believe they've made a brilliant choice, and we think that it's going to enable them to be a true leader across the region.
Well, it took a while to get announced and then approved, but that is all sorted now.
Yeah, so it's got a degree of difficulty that came with the case. So I was actually living and working out of the United Arab Emirates, doing from 2013 through late 2015 when this case was underway. And during the Arab Spring, there were some issues with respect to some potential human rights abuses, but they had absolutely nothing to do with the Bahrain military. The previous administration had put in some restrictions on releasing the aircraft, and it wasn't until the Trump administration took over that the aircraft in the case are allowed to proceed. And we ended up finishing that case in the 2018 timeframe.
Joel, it's John Lake here. So as we saw, production of these aircraft has now started. Can we still expect a 2022 delivery timeframe?
Yeah, so the production schedule obviously is something for the United States government to address. It has a degree of sensitivity, so we won't talk about exactly when they're getting all their aircraft, but they're on track. Our program team is on track. We've had no issues with respect to delivery for the United States Marine Corps aircraft, and the Bahrain aircraft are folded right into that delivery schedule. In fact, our on-time delivery rate during COVID has been unimpeded. For the United States aircraft, the United States Marine Corps rather, we just completed our 89th on-time or ahead of delivery schedule for the United States Marine Corps.
Joe, John mentioned earlier that Bahrain operates the AH-1 Foxtrot. Then, what's the difference with this from the Cobra to this new Viper? What does it bring to the party?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alan, and I'm very happy to share some of that information. The AH-1F, an aircraft that was around the United States Army until the 1990s, very capable, very competent this machine. The AH-1Z, though, is a completely new level of technology. They moved to a completely different rotor system, a completely different delivery system with the weapons, a new sight system, improved countermeasures. The AH-1 Whiskey is a marinized aircraft, but the AH-1Z takes it to a whole new level. And I think with respect to marinization, when you look at where Bahrain has to live and operate the aircraft, when you have point of manufacture marinization, the Bahrainis were actually far ahead when you start looking at the total life cycle costs of an aircraft. And when you're operating aircraft in a caustic saltwater environment, you need aircraft that can actually prosecute any level of work that needs to be done at land or at sea through the littoral region. The Bahrainis have an aircraft now that is state of the art, not only with systems, sensors, weapon systems, but across the region, they now have, they bring some diversity to the user group. And so they're surrounded by AH-64 users. Inherently, when a fleet grounding takes place, and that happened in the not too distant past with the tension torsion straps on the Boeing AH-64 fleet, the fleet is grounded. The beauty of Bahrain having a diverse set of AH-1Zs is there will still be an attack helicopter option for collective defense along the Gulf Coast on their side, with those aircraft being able to be employed should there be a fleet-wide grounding of Apaches.
Well, that's a great point, Joel, and it's been great having you with us, and we look forward to seeing you later in the year at the Bahrain Air Show. And it is quite an interesting point, John, where he's talking about the Apaches grounded for a reason. What else do you fly if your entire joint exercise group fleet are all flying the same helicopter and it's all grounded?
No, absolutely, but there are other really good reasons for Bahrain not to go for Apache. I mean, you'll remember, as I do, when we were out in Bahrain at the beginning of this process, the Bahrainis were very concerned that the Apache takes a very long time to actually get started and get it up in the air. So that's a disadvantage if what you want is really rapid reaction. And that's key for the Bahrainis. The other thing is that the Bahrainis, their concept of operations is to use these aircraft within urban areas. And so in constrained spaces, perhaps between high-rise buildings, the Apache's got a massive rotor diameter and is relatively unwieldy, whereas the Cobra is much more nimble. Previously, Bahrain was very interested in the TAI T129, the Turkish attack aircraft. Now, Pakistan is now very interested in the T129, having previously tried to order the same AH-1 Viper. Now, Jay, I guess you've got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, actually, Pakistan also had previously ordered the same number, around 12 aircraft, but the deal failed due to the export restrictions imposed against Islamabad by the US administration. But I'm sure that after the Bahrain export success, there will be a lot of other orders expected from the Middle East as well, because the UAE is also very interested in this.
Thanks, Jay. Well, corruption has been in the headlines this month. Last week, news outlets in Kuwait reported that a Kuwaiti court had ordered the detention of the country's former Prime Minister, Jabbar al-Mubarak al-Hamad al-Sabah, on corruption charges. It was a case over the alleged mishandling of the military aid fund. Another former minister, Sheikh Khalid al-Jarrah al-Sabah, the Interior Minister, is also being held along with 2 army officers, imprisoned in the same case. Now, these allegations date back to around 2010. But Jay, there's also been some headlines recently and a robust response from Dassault coming from India. What's that all about?
See, Alan, there is a saying in India that no defense deal is complete without a corruption charge. And, and this excessive reliance on foreign firms for India is the key reason why arms dealers are flourishing in India. So when the French online news portal reported that the contract, the Dassault had agreed to pay an Indian company 1 million euros for producing large replica of the Rafale jet, to around euro 1.1 million was entered as gifts to the client. So that has kicked up a storm once again. Since the day one, the Rafale deal was under scrutiny by the opposition, because they said, when they negotiated the deal, the cost was much less, but now the India government has bought it at least 2.5 million euros more than what it had negotiated. So, but Dassault, since the spokesman said that they have implemented strict internal procedures to prevent corruption, guaranteeing the integrity, ethics, and reputation of the company in its industrial and commercial relations. So, if I quote, the spokesman said, numerous controls are carried out by official organizations, including the French Anti-Corruption Agency. No violations were reported, notably in the frame of the contract with India for the acquisition of 36 Rafales. So that was the response from the manufacturer.
So a very good, robust response from Dassault. So thank you for that. Well, let's move off that now and let's look at some exciting news about Qatar and the RAF and a joint training squadron in Yorkshire, England. And John, you know all about that one.
No, absolutely. The Royal Air Force and Qatar began this process with the formation of the first joint Typhoon squadron. The Royal Air Force and Qatar, both forming number 12 Squadron Royal Air Force, basically to give Qatari pilots real experience on the aeroplane, to bring them up to a full combat edge on the Typhoon. They now have 6 pilots, 4 of them ex-Mirage pilots, 2 of them ab initio guys who've gone through the Royal Air Force flying training system, and they're now all combat ready. They're all flying missions with RAF aircraft and very much looking forward to the first Qatari Typhoons, and they'll then go back to Qatar so that the Qatari Typhoon squadron can hit the ground running. Now, as part of that deal, Qatar bought 9 Hawks eventually. It was originally just going to be 6, but they're buying 9 Hawks. We're expecting the first of those to fly any time at all, actually. And they've decided that they're going to form another joint squadron. This one will be a Hawk Advanced Flying Training Squadron. It will be equipped with whereas the joint Typhoon squadron uses RAF Typhoons, the joint Hawk squadron will use these new Hawk 167s, the aircraft for Qatar, and it will be used for training both Qatari and Royal Air Force pilots. It's going to be based at RAF Leeming, an enormously useful shot in the arm for Leeming, which has just had bad news in the UK Defence review, which has seen the Royal Air Force Hawk Aggressor Squadron at Leeming. The writing's on the wall for that, so really useful replacement. This squadron, we think, is actually going to have a Qatari number plate, not a Royal Air Force number plate, and we're expecting that to be the 11th squadron currently operating the Alpha jet in Qatar.
John, can I just ask as well, wasn't there something about aerial refuelling now happening as well as part
Yes,
of this
that's
deal?
all part of the same deal. The Royal Air Force will be deploying a Voyager tanker to Qatar on a fairly regular basis to allow all of the Qatari new fighters and their new fighter pilots to really get some proper experience in air-to-air refueling training. So that will be the Rafale pilots, obviously not the F-15 pilots because they have a different refueling method. They use the refueling boom method. They don't use hose and drogue.
Thanks, John. Jay, there were reports from the recent India MRO conference that maintenance, repair and overall business in India is undergoing a disruptive change for the better. And this could have an effect on the defence industry.
Yeah, that's right, Alan, because the military starts to tighten their budget, and a slow but sure change is constant, whenever it happens. So the defense aircraft MRO business is opening up large-scale opportunities for private and civil MRO players in the country. So the reason is clear. Spares of legacy Soviet and Russian aircraft is waning, and India is having a large number of Western equipment, including the Apache, the C-17s, the P-8Is, the C-130Js, Rafales, and many such. So, they're all aging, barring the Sukhois and the new Rafales. All other aircraft, we need the MROs.
That's a great point, Jay. As India experiences a violent second wave of COVID, logistics costs have come down as aircraft get maintenance in India. OEMs, including Boeing and Airbus, have started using private MROs for life cycle management, for monitoring of spares. And while India has some way to go, aerostructures, landing gears, some components and avionics are being serviced by private civil MROs who've proved their capability. Now, our correspondent Neelam Matthews has been looking into this synergy in military-civil MRO.
Civil-military synergy is taking place now in India. Boeing, as part of its defense offset regulations, has contracted D-checks to Airworks for the 737 models of the Indian Navy's P-8Is and the Air Force's Boeing business jets used for VVIPs, including the Prime Minister. The interiors of the BBJ have been refurbished by US Aloft at the hangar of Airworks. The company is also carrying out modifications on the Mi-17s. Tendering is on by Boeing to tap an Indian partner now for the Chinooks and Apaches ordered by the Air Force. We have with us today Rohit Tomar, a data whiz, Managing Director and founder of Calidris Aero Consulting, based in Ahmedabad in the western state of Gujarat. Thanks, Rohit, for joining us.
Thank you, Neelam, for having me here.
So, Rohit, what is the total aircraft strength of the Indian military, fixed and rotary? What opportunities does this open up for private companies in MRO?
Sure. So our current strength is approximately 1,800 total rotary plus the fixed wing aircraft, and it's split, almost about 49, 51 kind of percentage in terms of the rotary wing 49 and 51 as fixed wing. We have a large number of these fleet of the aircraft and helicopters which are pretty old, and that brings in one more challenge for us is a lot of these items which have been manufactured and the production line has been shut down. We see a demand for doing the maintenance on this, and that's where HAL has been trying to position itself. HAL has been doing this work for a long period of time. But I think the opportunity that really arises are twofold, at least in my point of view. Number one, I think HAL now needs to sort of refocus and create or be very sure about what its identity is in the defense MRO ecosystem. Are they just an MRO service provider? Are they an aggregator? Are they an OEM?
With the new aircraft being added, what are the strengths and weaknesses in the Indian civil MRO infrastructure? And has there been some high technology being added, or are there plans for some such thing?
So while we are generating or new next generation of aircraft is coming into India, in reality, we don't have the capability of maintaining the components of that aircraft. While yes, we can certify the aircraft, but we have absolutely no capability of ensuring that we can maintain those aircrafts, and we have not factored that in when we were signing our type certificate approvals or procedures with either FAA or the EASA. Unlike what you have in China or for that matter Singapore, where at least in China it was mandatory that any aircraft which is flown within China, you had to prove that every component can be maintained within China. There was no such regulation in India, and that's becoming a very difficult problem for the Indian MRO industry to solve.
But what about military MRO? Are they capable? What parts can they service of the military aircraft at the moment?
Supply chain in an MRO industry is like a blood within a human body. So you can have all the organs and all the key things functioning, but if you don't have the blood, if you don't have control over the blood, none of that is going to matter. That is where has been the biggest challenge of military MRO in India. We have not been able to control the supply chain. The supply chain is still outside. We are heavily dependent on OEMs. OEMs have no interest in producing parts which are outdated, which is not a part of their production line. And that becomes a challenge. There is an opportunity. Yes, it's an opportunity because now that you can get your private companies to start getting and manufacturing some of these components, but it's too late because you have to understand these components are older generation aircraft components. So the technology has changed. So any of these projects that you undertake, unless these projects are undertaken in a way where it starts from defense but then gradually moves into civil, there is no scalability for any business to invest money into it.
And that's been wonderful talking to you, Rohit. Many thanks for your input. Increasingly, it is being recognized it is not the job of the government to run a business. Partnerships with OEMs for MRO are becoming the norm. And sooner or later, we may even see India's neighbors flying to India for their military MRO.
That was Neelam Matthews, our correspondent, and Rohit Tomar from Calidris Aero Consulting in Ahmedabad. I guess we're running out of time, Alan.
Indeed we are, John. That is it. So it's been a fascinating day today. And Jay, thank you for joining us from New Delhi. And John, thank you very much for being with us.
Always a pleasure.
As ever, yeah. And most of all, though, thank you for joining us for the programme. There's plenty more defence updates on our websites, and do visit our YouTube video channel where there are some great videos from the recent IDEX show in Abu Dhabi, and we also have had some where we take a good look at some of the latest defence technology coming out of the Edge Group in the UAE. So it's goodbye from us as we leave you with this message from our sponsors. Goodbye.
Goodbye.